Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in John chapter 5, and we left off at verse 2 because there is a kind of a story that I decided to let's address. Um, I'm going to get back to the story in a moment. We were talking about verse 2 is in brackets because it talks about how an angel came down and stirred the waters. I'll get back to that in a moment. But that's in brackets because um, that phrase wasn't in certain manuscripts. In order to understand the manuscripts, we was talking about how that when the New Testament writers pen their letters, their writings, they did it on papyri plants, and then that was so flimsy, but also there were literally thousands of copies made. And any of you came out of the 80s like I did, where we would dub tape. Now, dubbing tapes were a lot more reliable because of the taping, but I kind of gave an illustration of how sometimes a message could be marred because of, like, you have professional taping, obviously, because later I end up having a dual cassette tape, and that made taping one better, clearer. But if you didn't have the money to have a dual cassette tape, right? You got the little cheap tape recorders. You got two cheap tape recorders side by side, and you played the tape, and that presented sometimes not good recordings. And so, and they still would have been better than the papyri plant methods that the New Testament writers used. But what happened was that they were not worrying about copyright issues. They were the New Testament writers and leaders were very, very much so wanted the message to get out. And so you could copy, people can copy, and they'd be like, hey, they can write a copy. Now, sometimes when they were writing a copy, as they were copying it, errors sometimes could have happened. What we have today, we said, as a result of collecting the copies of copies, some 30,000 copies, what they call 30,000, I believe it's 5,000 maybe original copies, and then 25,000 of copies, okay? And that's, so when a person, then when we make a translation of the Bible, you have that copies in which is the resource. Okay, so that's why, for example, we know that the Jehovah Witnesses New World Translation, that they attempted to tamper with, even though they couldn't do it the way they couldn't tamper with their translation the way they want. However, they did make several errors. How do we know? Because you could go to the manuscripts. Okay, so that's why I say, so when you see the brackets, scholars are able to say this is certain things are questionable. Okay, and like we're getting ready to see, let's go to it. Like we're getting ready that, when we say that well, let me just read it, and then you can kind of understand with that background. Verse 2 says that, verse 1 says, after this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there is a pool called Bethesda, and Bethesda in Hebrews, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of sick, blind, and lame, paralyzed. And here's where the brackets start. And then it says, waiting for the moving of the water, because an angel would go down into the pool from time to time and stir the water. Then the first one who got in after the water was stirred up, recovered from whatever ailment he had. Now, what's interesting about this story here, now, by the way, this is where the bracket's at, because here's the thing. The story kind of seems very odd. In other words, what these people believed, In other words, these crowds of people, lame people, paralyzed people, right? Sick people. They gathered around this pool and then hoping that the water would stir. Now, here's what we don't know about this story here. John is recording the story. We don't know if this actually happened. In other words, did the water actually stir? Let's say then if it actually stirred, could it have stirred because, I don't know, ground tremoring or something, But then there was then the belief that when it stirred, right? In other words, so picture an angel coming down, stirring the water, and then people go, oh, the water is stirring. And they would get to get up, and then jump into the water. And then the belief was that they were healed. This, again, so here's the thing. We don't know if this story is actually true. In other words, did this actually happen? John is recording. This is what the people were gathering around, believing what would happen. So we don't know if it actually happened. And certainly, if it actually happened, then, we could go on with where there actually healed people that can come back and go, hey, y'all just keep up hope. Keep up hope, everybody, right? So I'm going to now interject my belief that this story is what they believe, not something that actually happened, even though the way it is told is that, okay, it happened. So again, just like the story about in Matthew 28 that, when Jesus gave up the ghost, the temple curtain was rent. And then that part is, in a sense, is true. But the next statement says that the tombs were open and many of the Old Testament saints came out and greeted people. I mean, appeared to people. That's like didn't happen. Okay. So my point is that you have these couple of stories here that seem, kind of out of place. And again, I'll let the scholars, and I'm not qualified, so I'll let the scholars debate that. Now, here's the other thing is, the question would be, why then are they in the writings? Why are they in the New Testament? And here's my thing. I don't think they hurt the story. So whether it happened or not, it doesn't hurt. In other words, if the story read something like an angel came down, stirred the water, and says, "Hey, praise, Dagon the god," and then people praised Dagon the god and got healed. Obviously, that would be kind of flagrant. No, that didn't happen. And so therefore, you know, um, but so to me, okay, I'm going to say this. This is my opinion right here. So I got to put brackets around it. My opinion. I believe people gathered at this pool, the lame, the cripple, sick people gathered because this is what they were told. This is what they came to believe. And let's just say that this is not something preposterous either. Because think about this now for a moment. Think about this. How many people go to healing ministries today? Hmm? How many people go to think about all of the healing evangelists today? I mean, there's some alive, but just you go back 50 years, maybe 60. Well, let's go back even further. Let's say, some of the ones that kind of were popular. There was always fake healers, but the 40s. I think Oral Roberts came along in the late 40s, I believe. And they all had they had the gimmick. He would pray for them. And when he would pray for them, the vast majority of the people he prayed for didn't get healed. In fact, I just kind of came across a video that I was watching where a young Oral Roberts, right? And I think about this for a moment. It was Oral Roberts, seemed like, I don't know if he was somewhere where it seemed like there was a large black gathering. And there was a black girl, young teenage girl, looked like in a wheelchair. He prays for her, and she gets up and she walks around. Now, do I believe that actually happened? No. Knowing Oral Roberts, I don't believe that. Now, certainly, by the way, when you think, hey, give me your address for testimony. In other words, if these guys actually had actual healings, trust me when I say they would have these people with their testimonies, right? They would pay them, travel with us for testimony. But you think about the Benny Hinn's of today, Benny Hinn, who fake healing. Now, if you just go on, I get them because I kind of clicked on some of these videos, and of course now the algorithm sends me all these videos now. I've seen a lot of Hispanic, right, videos. Cause I don't know if they're in Mexico, South America, somewhere where you have a lot of, these, again, people have kind of picked up on the gimmick, right? And people are pretending like the power of God is falling, right? The power of God is falling, right? And so we have it today. So the fact that you have people gathering around and they're because of a story that was told, that when the water starts to tremble now, and you don't know when the water is going to tremble, just all of a sudden you just need to be there when it trembled, and that whoever got into the water after it trembled, they were healed. Now this story is not validated in any kind of way, but anyway, it sets up what Jesus is getting ready to do. Okay, so verse 5. One man was there who had been sick for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to them, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the sick man answered, "I don't have a man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, someone else go down ahead of me." Now, what's kind of interesting, that the man believed that he needed to get to that well. Now, and you can't blame them, right? You really can't blame people when you're in that condition. And they did not have Medicaid, Medicare back then. Life was hard. If you, we're going to see a couple of more kind of. We're going to see another situation coming up in the 9th chapter where, again, when you were crippled, when you were disabled, when you got grown, parents say, "Okay, you're on your own." And one of the things you would do is beg. And that's what happened. This man here, he would sit there. He's 38 years old. So he probably was begging, or because he was waiting to be healed. Okay. Now, Jesus asked him, "Do you want to get well?" He says, "No one puts me in the water." It would be kind of interesting, right? That this is what, again, like I said, the story itself seems to be odd. But anyway, verse 8. "Get up," Jesus told him, "pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. And I want to again throw another clap back at the fake healers. Notice here, Jesus didn't say, "Well, just confess your healing." Notice Jesus didn't say, "Just keep believing," and walked away. He said, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." The man did. And notice he walked. And the man was paralyzed. This was a tangible condition. So you could not fake getting up and walking. He got up. So true healers that manifest the real power of God heals, not knock you down to the ground. And look, I was under that kind of theology for nearly 20 years of my Christian walk, that I believe that was the power of God knocking people down. But you if you're standing there, at some point you're going to say, this is not real. I guarantee you Benny Hinn knows that he's a fake. He absolutely knows he's a fake. And when it comes to people that have real issues, real tangible issues, they never, ever, ever, ever produce real healings. I'll give you an example. Just last summer in Kenneth Copeland's convention that he has every year, Benny Hinn was there. Room full of people, right? Thousands of people. Kenneth Copeland's son escorted his mother, Gloria Copeland. Gloria Copeland was, of course, there throughout the years with Kenneth Copeland. She even taught healing school. She taught the whole word of faith doctrine, laws of faith, laws of healing, everything. And now it's reported she's suffering from dementia. Kenneth Copeland's son asked Benny Hinn right there in the service. It's on tape. Can you pray for my mother? Now he's asking the man, which is kind of ironic, since you know this is fake. Kenneth Copeland's son grew up, prospered, enjoyed prosperity of the fake messages that they taught. Now you're going to ask a faith healer to go pray for your mother who has a real problem. Well, Benny Hinn did. And guess what? She's still the same. That's the sadness of this. That's the sadness. But notice here, Jesus has real, legitimate, healings. Get up, Jesus told him, pick up your mat and walk. Instantly the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now the day was the Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, this is the Sabbath. It is illegal for you to pick up your mat. Now here's where the trickery of the law come in at. You were not supposed to do any servile work. One man under the Old Testament was gathering sticks, and they go, oh man, this dude's gathering sticks. They arrested him and then stoned him. Now the Jews were jealous and mad. They wasn't rejoicing because the man got healed. And later Jesus would rebuke them and said, don't you go get your ox out of a ditch? That's work. Notice he said, it is illegal for you to pick up your mat. He replied, the man who made me well told me to pick up my mat and walk. Who is this man who told you, pick up your mat and walk? They asked. But the man who was cured did not know who it was. But Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple complex and said to him, see, you are well. Do not sin anymore, that something worse doesn't happen to you. Now, this kind of implies that the reason why this man was in his condition because of sin. And it kind of shows you something. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. Notice verse 15 says, the man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Here is something we could read kind of behind the scenes, that this man, even though he was healed, even though he benefited, maybe this man did not have true faith. Notice he went and reported to the Jews instead of rejoicing in his healing. Later, we're going to see in chapter 9, you'll see a contrast in a man who was not only healed, but came to faith in Jesus. So we're not kind of through this kind of narrative. And it is interesting, notice that Jesus tells the man, do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you. Now, Jesus told a parable once about the generation that he was living in, and he said that a person once a person got demons were cast out of a person, and the demons went wandering around in dry places, and they said, we're going to go back to our house. They go back to the house. They found it swept and empty, but not filled. So they entered the man, and his last state was worse than his first. Notice Jesus tells this man, don't sin anymore, insinuating that the reason why he was crippled was because of a sin. And now Jesus says, don't. And you notice the man shows no gratitude towards Jesus, but ran to the Pharisees. That kind of shows to me his heart. That kind of shows, and that even though this man was touched by God in terms of his physical, that he never changed his ways. Now we don't know, we don't hear anything else about what happens to him, but it is just interesting. Just interesting. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section.